Well, I'm really excited to be here. And so, yes, as you just learned, I'm Will's dad. Before that, I was Frank Guidara. I'm a lifelong restaurateur, been doing this my entire life. I love this business, but I'm retired now. So when Will called many months ago to ask if I'd speak at this conference, I said, I don't think so. I don't think so. I'm retired. The reason I retired is because I don't want to work. And that sounds like work. This rubber mat, it must have been a real problem, Sam. But he didn't like that answer, so here I am. And I'm glad, because actually it allowed me to think about the people who've inspired me through many of my own conflicts. I've learned so many lessons in the 156 years I've been in this business. And I spent a lot of time trying to think of what it is I wanted to share with you today. I'm sure that given the theme of this conference that many of us speakers are going to be saying the same things. We're going to cross over similar subjects. But there's really one key takeaway I want you to leave this conference with, and I think it's powerful. It's a simple phrase, and I learned it from a good friend of mine years ago, a guy by the name of Charlie Plum. Adversity is a terrible thing to waste. Adversity is a terrible thing to waste. I mean, you know that conflict, adversity, it happens. And you don't need to love it, but you gotta want to embrace it and squeeze it like hell, get everything you can possibly out of it in order to learn everything you can from it. And the more the adversity, the more you're gonna learn. Now, the first embrace of adversity took place in 1969. Will mentioned that I went to Officers Candidate School and got this little leadership guide. But I had just graduated from college. I was 21 years old. I was working for American Airlines in their Sky Chefs division. See, I was the guy that got the food that you ate onto the plane. 1969, the food was delicious. Right? I mean, flying was glamorous. People got dressed up to fly. You didn't have to worry about getting dragged off a plane. I got to tell you, I loved that job. I loved every element of that job. It was, in fact, there that I met Will's mother. It was also during the time of the Vietnam conflict. And I saw people all around me getting drafted. And it was becoming increasingly clear to me that I was most likely going to get drafted as well. But rather than waiting to see what might happen, I decided that if there was ever a chance of getting drafted, I wanted to go in as a leader, not a follower. So rather than waiting, I enlisted, signed up for Officers Candidate School, so I could do exactly that. I wanted to be master of my destiny as much as I could. Now, my first assignment in Vietnam was I was in charge of supply and equipment on a fire base in the middle of the jungle. We had about 800 guys, and since I was in charge of ammunition and mail and food, I was basically the guy running the place. I loved it. I mean, I actually loved it. It played to my strengths. It was satisfying to be given a job and to do it well. But I wasn't in Vietnam to play house. I wanted to be part of the action. I wanted to get involved. I wanted my own platoon. And so every week, I'd go to the battalion commander, Colonel Bacon, and tell him exactly that. And every week, more or less, he would remind me that I was the boss, that he was the boss, and I was the hoss. And I should stop bothering him. Until one day, about 6 months in, I went to talk to him, and he actually said, yes, I got what I wanted. I was going to get my own platoon. Now, about that platoon. It wasn't a great platoon. Maybe I was given it because no one else wanted it, or maybe Colonel Bacon gave it to me because I had been a pain in the ass. But here's one thing I want to identify, and one of the biggest lessons I came out of Vietnam with in terms of adversity. In the real world, we get to choose our own teams. We get to hire them, and we also get to choose whether we want to continue working with those people. We can, if we decide, we can fire them. And that can result in a behavior where you're constantly looking at your team and seeing what's wrong with them so that you can try to improve it or determine whether or not they are worthy of being part of your organization. In Vietnam, in war, very different. A, the consequences are life and death. B, to make matters worse, you don't get to choose your own team. Most of them don't want to be there, and you certainly can't fire anyone. And so your job is to look at everyone in your team and identify their strengths so that you can play to their strengths. I finally got my own platoon, and no, it wasn't the best, and yet I was going into combat with them. That's adversity. So how do you deal with that? In a platoon of 25 soldiers, now the normal size of a platoon was, as I remember anyway, 43. So you had to really find the strengths in every single person that you had. One guy, whose nickname was Kentucky, was arguably the worst in the entire platoon. No hand-eye coordination, lazy, not in great shape, not the brightest bulb on the string, not even plugged in. In the beginning, I was getting frustrated with Kentucky, and then I said, hold on, let me get to know this guy. And I did. I found out that he was from the backwoods of, you guessed it, Kentucky. We were extremely creative. Lived his entire life in the woods, where all of us city slickers were in the boonies for the first time. Because he grew up in it, he had a God-given gift of direction. He was amazing at never getting lost. He always knew where he was. And yet, because I had never, and I got to point out that in the jungle, I mean, you couldn't see feet in front of you. We were always lost. I normally kept him in the middle of the pack because he could do the least amount of damage there. After my meetings with him and getting to know him better, I moved him to point. How lucky was he? Those were the guys that normally got shot first. By the end, I came to love every single guy in that platoon. I hated to leave when my tour was over. The leadership principle I used with him was number 10. Employ your command in accordance with its capabilities. So here's the lesson. In the Army, you have your team. You don't choose them. You're given them, and you can't fire them. And the consequences of making the wrong decision there, well, it was much more serious than food going to the wrong table. So you can't waste your time trying to judge those people or criticize them for not being exactly the way that you want them to be. You need to invest your time to get to know them and find all the good that exists in them. Because, it's really unbelievable. Even Bob Wire has some good points. After all, adversity is a terrible thing to waste. The second crisis in my life began in 1984. I was about to join Restaurant Associates as president of the Theme Restaurant Division. And I also want to thank those guys for stepping up and being a big part of today's conference. We were living in Sleepy Hollow, just north of New York City. I was married to my wife, Janet, and Will was 4 years old. Life was great. I had a smart and beautiful wife, a house that I loved, a job that I really, really loved, and an amazing, smart, handsome, kind of a pain-in-the-ass son. I had everything I ever wanted. And then one day, in a single doctor's appointment, everything changed. Janet hadn't been feeling well. And it had been going on long enough where we went to see a doctor, actually a couple of doctors. And then ultimately we found out that she had brain cancer. It was made clear to us that if she lived, she'd be a quadriplegic within just a few years. It was one of those moments where, in a single sentence, my entire life changed. Now here I was for years. I was the guy at work and in life who didn't allow people to use the word can't. I hated the word can't. I believe that you can do anything that you want to do if you decide that you're capable of doing it. And suddenly there was one night, I was sitting alone in our dining room. It was late, I had just gotten home from work. Will and Janet were both asleep upstairs. And I had my head in my hands, saying to myself, I can't do this. And in that moment, hearing myself think the exact word that I'd spent so many years telling other people not to use, I had a revelation. You see, the reality was the person with head in hand, he couldn't actually do it. But I could. It just meant that I needed to change. I needed to look at myself, identify where I was strong and where I was weak, so I could understand how I needed to move forward. Leadership principle number 2, know yourself and self-improvement. Now, up until that point, we were like most families then. Janet was at home taking care of Will, and I was working all the time. We were doing a pretty good job. I was the father, she was the mother. I started going to work earlier in the morning so I could get off earlier and watch Will's soccer games. I had to be the one to start talking to him about his feelings. Yeah, I mean, that wasn't my role. Suddenly, Janet wasn't the only one to keep him happy and smiling. I used to be demanding as a father, and now I had to learn how to be encouraging like a mother. You know, although it's changed for the better, in those days, you know, the mother knew everything about the child. She knew his secret fears, or the child's secret fears, knew the dentist appointments, knew best friends, knew their favorite foods, where the father was vaguely aware of the little thing running around the house. Now, can I stand here and say, I'm happy that my wife got brain cancer? No, I wish more than anything that hadn't happened. I wish she was still here today and that Will had his mom. But so through that moment of adversity, I can stand here and judge it for all the ways that it ruined me. Or I can say through that moment of adversity, I became a man that I never would have become. I'm here in front of you with greater love and greater compassion. I'm a better father and a better man. And so in a bizarre way, I'm thankful for all the ways that it made me who I am today. Adversity is a terrible thing to waste. In 2007, it had been about 6 years since Janet passed away. And after a long time being single, I met a woman who I fell completely in love with. Her name is Juliet, and she's sitting up there in the front row of the balcony. Will and I have always been exceptionally close. And that part of my life has always been great. But finally, with my loved one, after all the storm and drang, I felt great. But then, just a few days before our first wedding anniversary, once again, in a single sentence, my entire world fell apart. Again, how many times can your entire world fall apart? I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Now, if you don't know what pancreatic cancer is, that's the really bad one. That's the one where basically you're screwed. In terms of a 5-year survival rate, it's only 5.4%. And here I was. I had finally gotten everything back, and boom, another dose of major league adversity. The leadership principle here is set the example. And nobody did it better than Juliet. As much as I wanted to live, I don't think I'd be alive today were it not for her, because she wanted me to live even more. In this woman, the things that she did, she studied every single different thing a person should do to get better, and we did all of them. Note the pronoun there, we did all of them. She didn't just sit there and tell me the things I needed to do in order to heal. She did them alongside me, and because she knew that if I had a partner doing everything that she was doing, that there was a better chance that I'd do it too. My diet changed considerably. As the guys, and many of them are the same, from when I was there, the guys in RA will attest, I love food. I mean, I love a lot of food. I mean, a lot of food. But now, I became a raw vegan. I don't know if you know what a raw vegan is, but you can eat like one thing. No exaggeration. Anyway, Juliet became a raw vegan as well. And it made it a whole lot easier. That's not all we did. I'm an old school guy who hates the color pink. And suddenly I was doing a bunch of mumbo jumbo. I mean, like going to energy healers and doing acupuncture and taking seaweed baths. Have you ever taken a seaweed bath? I mean, they stink. They really stink. But every step of the way, Juliet, she was doing those things with me. And she even wrote a book about the experience in order to help people to get through difficult experiences like this, and the title of the book is 5.4%. no surprise. And through a combination of all those things, and most of all, Juliet setting the example, 9 years later, I stand here today with the ability to say, thank God I'm cancer-free. That's very nice. I wasn't expecting an applause, but then thank you. But there's another lesson I learned through all of this. When I first got cancer, I kept on working. I worked through the entire time. Only 4 people in my company knew what I was going through. See, I was a really intense person. I lived to work. I wanted to be the best. I was willing to invest all of myself in pursuit of all those things, to be the best. Days off were a distraction. And although I always made sure to give enough time to be a good father and a good husband, the idea of giving myself time to just experience life was not something that I ever considered. But when I finally healed, suddenly I found myself looking at the world through a new lens. And to the surprise of everyone in my life, I chose to retire. And you know why? Because getting cancer gave me a new perspective that I've never had before. It gave me, for the first time, a sense of my own mortality. Had it not been for that experience, I'd still be working like a dog. But I've been given one of the greatest gifts of all, permission to slow down, to open my eyes and see the world in a way that I had never seen it before. So many people I know have complained that retirement is hard. But if you like and especially if you like what you do and you love doing it. But for me, the perspective I gained, that couldn't be further from the truth. Cancer gave me the grace to look at this phase of my life as a gift, an opportunity to live, to love, to laugh, an opportunity to take advantage of what I didn't think I was gonna have. Adversity, terrible thing to waste. So there you are, 3 moments of adversity, conflicts I've faced in my life, and how they have indeed made me a better man. My platoon in Vietnam, learning to see the good in people first before the bad, and trying to figure out how to take a group of people and make them the best versions of themselves. Janet's cancer, understanding that in the most dire of situations, you can always succeed if you have the self-awareness to recognize what it is about yourself that needs to improve. That if approached the right way, the most challenging moments in your life are the ones that can actually make you a better person. In my case, a better father. In my cancer, knowing the importance of setting the example, because the best way to get other people to follow you is to show that you're willing to do what they're doing right alongside them. Recognizing the beautiful perspective that you can gain from any situation you're in, no matter how bad it may seem at the time. I'm going to tell you, I'm excited to be alive and to be with you today. So proud to be speaking at my son's world-class conference, and I hope you enjoyed the talk. Remember, adversity is inevitable. There's no way to avoid it, but you can decide how you're going to react to it. My advice, get excited, because with it, you'll always find opportunity. Now, would you please, because I said there's only one thing I want you to leave this conference with, and that's that very simple phrase. Would you say it along with me? Adversity is a terrible thing to waste. Thank you very much.